A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Mergerware webinar, Essentials of M&A Success, the impact of leadership effectiveness on deal outcomes. We have with us today our panelist, Karen Isley. Karen is the founder of Isley Associates, an M&A specialist and the founder of Isley Associates International, an Australian-based global consulting business providing M&A and advisory services, partnering with clients to anticipate and manage their people-related deal risks. Karen's experience as an HR professional, business leader, and management consultant makes her a trusted advisor, project leader, and coach for many local and international transactions, both corporate and private equity clients, with over 25 years working on deals. She has a particular expertise in preparing business leaders to capably navigate M&A transactions. Karen is known for her commercial focus, creativity, professionalism, bringing together relevant expertise from her professional networks to serve the needs of her clients. I am Prakya Bhatt, the Director of Customer Success at Mergerware, who will be the moderator of today's session. During the course of the webinar, please feel free to drop in any questions that you might have on the control panel questions tab that you will see. I will now hand over the session to Karen to begin with the presentation.
Thank you, Prakya, for both the opportunity and for your kind introduction. So glad to see so many on the call and amongst you some familiar, well, I was going to say faces, but names. My aim this afternoon is to do what it says on the package, help you guys to understand the impact of people experience on deal outcomes, to consider and explore what predicts people experience, so we know what we need to get better at, to focus especially on leadership capabilities, and also to share some tips and ideas about how to prepare for your deals such that you can improve your deal outcomes. We're going to go about this in 4 parts. We're going to first talk about my latest research, what we learned, and frankly, what happened next. We're going to focus specifically on M&A leadership effectiveness and roll into a number of questions, question and answer sessions. Would like to leave ample time to do that. And then wrap up with some advice on how to prepare. Before I start, I'd like to quickly capture your views, however, on 3 leadership questions. Prakya and her team have actually set up some polling questions for us. So I'm going to just share that with you in a second. So the first question is, how important is leadership effectiveness to deal success in your experience? And we're going to do that on a scale of 1 to 5. So let me pop that one in. And you should be able to just click on your screen on the scale of 1 to 5 to lock in your answer. Okay, looks like we're good. I'm going to close that one off. Second question, how effective are your business leaders in achieving deal success? Again, a scale of 1 to 5, and we're going to pop that poll up for you right now to get your input. Again, just click on the circle next to the choice that you make. Okay, we've got about half of you. Anybody else wanting to vote on this one? Oh, a couple more coming in. Give it another few seconds. Okay, closing 3, 2, 1, close. And lastly, third question, how much does your organization invest to improve M&A leadership capability? From 1, no investment at all, to 5, so much that we couldn't imagine investing anymore. So let me just pop that one up there for you guys. And if you could just hit the screen for your choice, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, we've got about 60% of you guys. Anybody else to add something? Do that in the next few seconds. Okay, and I'm going to be closing now. Great, so thank you for that. Look, my plan is to share these results when we kick off our Q&A session at the end. And as Pragya said, because we're not doing this as an interactive, immediate interactive kind of session, if questions come up as we're going along, just pop them into the question box, and we will take those towards the end of the session, okay? So first thing, we promised, let's talk a bit about the research that we've done. Now, the genesis of this research project was in support of a book that I'm working on. Working title, The Dealmaker's Guide to Humans, and my plan is to have this on the shelves by the end of the year. If I keep saying that enough times in forums, that will, I think, spur me on to finish. After looking at the existing research, I actually found a gap and decided to test the hypothesis that deal objectives are more likely to be met when people have a positive experience whilst they're going through a merger or similar business transaction than when their experience is negative. And what I'd like to do is I'll tell you what we found up front, so you're not hanging out there waiting for what we found, and then we'll take you through how we actually got to this. So basically what we find is people experience does predict whether expected deal objectives are to be met. And what we find is when people have a positive experience, deal objectives are more likely to be met. The trick of this is the so what. So if we know that, we then need to know how can we best impact the experiences that people have in order to improve our deal outcomes. And so the second part of the research that we did focuses on clarity and leadership effectiveness, which are predictors of whether people will have a positive experience. We also found that culture poses the biggest challenge in deals, hands down. It doesn't predict anything, but it's the biggest challenge. And then the M&A fundamentals of clarity, capability, execution have significant associations with both people experience and deal outcomes. So a little bit about the project. We looked at 198 deals all around the world. 60% of these were cross-border transactions. A quarter of our respondents were quarter each were business leaders, people team members, and M&A team members. So roughly 25%. And the remaining were board members, external advisors, and employees. So we had a great cross-section of people answering the survey that we used for this research. 44% of the respondents were on the buy side of the deal and 35% on the sell side. Just over half of the deals that we looked at were acquisitions. Just over 20% were sales and 15% mergers. And finally, in terms of organization type, 57% were listed companies, 30% private companies. And how we went about this is we asked respondents to think about a deal that was memorable to them and then provide information about the deal. So all of those things that I just shared with you, we asked them to provide. And then we asked whether or not the deal met stated objectives. And we used a scale it was a 5-point scale. So yes, we exceeded. Yes, we realized completely. Partially created some value. No, but we didn't destroy value. Or no, value was destroyed. We also included things like other, too early to tell, and unable to say. So we didn't force people to choose in those 5. So we excluded where we did not have clear data. Next, we asked 4 open-ended questions, which actually was part of the original reason for me really wanting to do some of this research, to get a bit of shade and light and some additional thoughts and views and opinions and advice to add to my Dealmaker's Guide to Humans. So we asked these open questions. What were the challenges? What went well? What went wrong? And what did you learn? And got upwards of 25,000 words of input from people. I think it was astounding. I've never been part of a project that had that much data coming back in terms of what people were prepared to write to us. I think there were only 2 or 3 respondents in the whole sample that didn't write us at least something. So quite a motivated sample group. And then after we had them fill out all of that information, then we asked about personal experience in the deal. And so first we asked the respondent, we said, how was it for you? And gave a scale from one of the best experiences of my career to one of the worst experiences of my career. And again, we left the option so that they could answer unable to say if they chose not to. So whilst that was interesting, it's probably not anything useful because it's not a variable that you can actually link to deal outcome. So what we did as our proxy for the variable that we needed is we then said to the person who was responding, if you had to say, what would you imagine the experience would have been for the majority of people impacted by this deal? And of course, we offered them the opportunity to say they were unable to say. Interestingly, these people who were close to deals, most, only 2% couldn't, were quite confident to be able to give a view on that. So what we had was views on whether objectives were met and what was the experience of the majority, plus a whole bunch of other key factors that we could test. So we used regression analysis to work out what this impact might look like. And here's what we found. People experience predicts deal outcome. What we found is that when people have a positive experience when they're going through a deal, the deal objectives are 4.5 times, just over 4.5 times more likely to be met. And when we actually looked at that sample again and we removed all of the data from partially met and just looked at deals that were successful, either they met or exceeded, or ones that were very unsuccessful, they didn't meet or they destroyed value, those odds went to 23 times. More likely that deal objectives are met when people have a positive experience. Now, this is a disadvantage of not being in the same room with you guys, because when I first saw that, I thought it was wrong. I thought we couldn't possibly have this. We spent some time and looked at it every which way again. No, it's actually right. And what the significance for both of those figures is 0.000. For the that's for the stats geeks amongst you. For us laymen, what that means is that there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that these results actually happened by chance. We did find a little bit of the only other association with deal outcome in all of that other data we collected about the deals was that there was an association with headquarter location. not relevant, because not necessarily a variable that you can play around too much with it. And frankly, I think it was probably more of a feature of country culture and reporting rather than an actual impact on deal outcome. And we actually found that, not unexpectedly, deal perspective, there was an association with people experience. That was the only significant, although not predictive, significant. 2/3 of buy-side participants report a positive experience compared to 44% of sell-side participants. So, you know, my hypothesis about that is when you have control, you actually have less stress, and therefore your experience is a little bit bigger. So again, and not something we can change. So not really helpful for us to work out what do we do to make our deals more successful. So anyway, it's all well and good to know that people experience predicts deal outcome, but in order to do anything about it, we actually need to know what has the most significant impact on people experience. And my view, lucky we asked those open-ended questions, because otherwise this would have been a pretty boring piece of research. We started our qualitative analysis by looking at the language that was used in all of those verbatim comments. And then, and this is true, I spent the next 8 months in that mountain of information to try to make sense of it. I'm going to now share what we learned, both around the language and also how we turned those qualitative results into quantitative data so that we could again use regression analysis to see what we could uncover. So in terms of challenges, you remember challenges, what went well, what went wrong, what did we learn, were the questions we asked. In terms of challenges, culture was the #1 word mentioned when we asked about these. So huge theme there. When we asked what went wrong, after employees and people, which I've combined for this reporting, business is the #1 word mentioned when asked what went wrong, followed closely by leadership and also that pesky acquired company it features in the what went wrong. In terms of lessons learned, after employees and people, again, leadership is the #1 word mentioned when we asked people about what were the lessons that they learned. And in terms of what went well, again, after the employees and people, but at about half of the frequency that it was mentioned as a challenge, what went wrong or lessons learned, team is the #1 word mentioned when asked what went well. So nothing you can really do quantitatively with that, but just a good guide to help us think about how were we going to code all of this mountain of data that we had to see what sense we can make. So we ended up coding, and when we say we, I mean I. So I was that guy in the data, and someone can remind me if those of you who know me, if I ever start talking about doing a major research project again without proper support, remind me of this moment. But anyway, I did the work on the coding, and we did it 3 ways. The first way we looked at it was by deal stage to see if there was any information about what was raised at particular stages of the deal that would actually help us predict how people experienced the deal and whether or not the deal was successful. Short answer, there was nothing that we found that was predictive when we looked at it in that traditional by deal stage kind of way. So we went back to the drawing board and we coded all of that same data again, but this time divided it by 3 themes: leadership, culture, and communication. And we chose these categories because in the research up to this point and research that I've been involved in the past, these were always kind of the people-related things that came up as being critical in deal success. And so we gave that a crack. And what we found is that leadership is predictive, and more on that later, but leadership actually is predictive. Culture isn't predictive, but it actually has an association with every of the deal fundamentals. And interestingly, communication didn't really feature in terms of associations or predictiveness. Maybe more on that in the Q&A, but my short thought of that is as deal advisors and people doing deals, we've actually focused in the last 10 years a lot on the act of communicating, and there's a lot more and a lot stronger and a lot better comms that are going on. So I was surprised to see it didn't show and predict, but it didn't. So there we go. We've got leadership as a predictor, culture everywhere, but not predicting, and communication not, and nothing happening by deal stage. So there's got to be something more to this, or we were looking to see what else there might be, what were we missing. And what I did is, based on kind of how things were starting to theme up, I looked at categories around clarity and capability and execution, and coded again that mountain of data on those three. So anything related to the context, why are we in business? Why are we doing this deal? Understanding our purpose, how things fit, and being in a position to communicate well and share information. In terms of capability, that's both business as usual, keeping things going while we're doing deals, as well as deal capability. And then the third category, the execution, is actually all of the features and factors about getting it done. So we coded everything on those, and let me share with you what we found. So we already know, of course, the quantitative impact of people experience on deals. In the qualitative data, we actually see that clarity, deal outcome is more likely, is 3.5 times more likely to be met. Deal objectives are let me try that again. Deal objectives are 3.9 times more likely to be met when clarity is not mentioned as a challenge. And then we found significant associations with deal outcome looking at leadership. Again, some more evidence around clarity, some evidence around execution, and further evidence around culture. So clarity is the predictor, and the associations are leadership, execution, and culture, direct impact on deal outcome. And then we looked at indirect impact on deal outcome by way of people experience. So by looking at what we believe will impact people experience, we can indirectly impact deal outcome. And what we found was that it's 3 times more likely that people will have a positive experience when leadership is not mentioned as a challenge, 5 times more likely when leadership is not seen as something that went wrong. It's 3.5 times more likely that people will have a positive experience when clarity is not a challenge. And it's 4 times more likely that people will have a positive experience when clarity is not seen as something that went wrong. That's where it gets good. Now, whilst not predictive, we did also find significant associations with all of the other deal factors. So more in leadership, more in clarity. Capability comes up in terms of the people experience for the first time, execution, and culture. So there you have it. People experience makes or breaks deals. And I gotta say, this research has absolutely changed how I do this work with my clients. Instead of looking at a time-based model of, here are all the deal stages and here are all the things that need to be done at each stage and let's figure out how to get better at doing those things, I've actually created a way to make sense of these fundamentals and help organizations get better at the things they need to get better at in order to have successful deals. Now, it doesn't take away the need to know what to do at each stage and how to do it, but I think we've been missing something over a lot of years by focusing only on what to do instead of how to get ready and how to be. So the first of these M&A fundamentals that I mentioned before is clarity. And when we talk about clarity, we're talking about both your business as usual infrastructure, we're talking about all of your enabling platforms, communication, knowledge management, workforce management. And then you're also talking about deal infrastructure. So what's your working model? What about your playbook, processes, toolkits, program management and governance frameworks, development programs, review process. We also are talking about resources, right? Both for business as usual and for your deal support, both internal and external. And then the basic skills, knowledge, experience that comes with what it is that you need to do. So capability. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I've skipped ahead. For clarity, what we're actually talking about, what we mean when we talk about clarity is actually why you're in business, how you're doing what you do, and why this deal actually makes sense in the context of what it is that you're aiming to do. So when you communicate that you're doing a deal, it's just a natural extension of how your employees understand why they come to work every day and why you guys do what you do. As I already explained, the capability, and that is all about getting ready. And the third fundamental is actually around execution. And this is all the getting it done kind of stuff. How are we working with our customers? What about our sales force? Are they aligned, engaged, up to date? What about resourcing? Do we have who we need? How are we bringing them on board? How are we communicating? How frequent? Is it two-way? Do people understand and know what they need to know? Do we have the mechanism in place to make that happen? This is also where all of the program establishment, program management, governance rhythm sits for all of the people involved in delivering this for you. You've got all of your culture in action work going on here. You've got your support functions and making sure that they're ready and that they're engaged, that they're delivering, and that you've got your tracking mechanisms in place. And finally, one that's oftentimes overlooked, your mindset, the mindset of your leaders, the mindset of your teams. How open, generous, accountable, principled are we? Because that has a huge impact on how you execute. So I haven't made a spot in this model for culture because culture is everywhere. Plus, I think I would have needed another dimension. I struggled with it a little bit in the beginning, but then I just stopped struggling because it literally is everywhere. And I mean, in 43% of the deals that we looked at in this research, culture is mentioned as a top challenge. It was mentioned most frequently, as I mentioned before, in terms of the biggest challenge faced. And interestingly, it's one of the top mentions in all significant findings that relate to the fundamentals of clarity, capability, and execution. So here's the kicker. Effective M&A leadership is the essential link. And I mean, this is actually my favorite part about what we found, because when we think about effective M&A leadership, what do we mean? What we mean is where clarity meets capability, there's a form of M&A leadership that's actually quite deliberate. And this is where M&A leaders assess the situation, they prioritize, they make investments, they do preparation. And the trick to this is that this actually has to happen much sooner than anyone else is thinking about it. And so these deliberate M&A leaders generally are top of the house, CEO, CFO. And so if the CEO and CFO get the value of being prepared, having capability, and being ready to go forward in a deal, those investments are easy for them to make and approve. And again, this needs to happen sooner than anyone is ever thinking, ever. The second kind of effective M&A leadership is where capability meets execution. And this is actually an influential type of M&A leader. This is where the role modeling comes in. I mean, you just need people to be an amazing role model, because look, we know that 70% of what employees do in our businesses is based on what they see us as leaders role modeling. So we can't have your leaders running around with their hair on fire, worrying about themselves and not able to cope in a situation. The challenge there also is those leaders don't have a chance at doing that role modeling and carrying out the role in the way that you want them to in the 10 minutes between when a deal is announced and when they're actually supposed to be doing that. And so a nod back to the deliberate M&A leadership in terms of building those capabilities. So these M&A leaders are great role models. They're amazing motivators. They actually build relationships and develop people in the hurly-burly of a deal. They don't just set all of that stuff aside, put their head down and work on the deal, and then pick up those people when things aren't so hectic anymore. They actually have a knack and a way of working. This part of my work aligns really nicely with there's some research that's been done by J. Keith Dunbar in the US. He's doing some things on his own, but also connected with the conference board there. And there's great alignment in terms of his research. And his research also looks at, it's worth Googling, J. Keith Dunbar. His research actually looks at also on the sell side of the deal and has found that this influential M&A leadership style is very critical to deal outcome for the mid-level managers on the sell side. So point of influential M&A leadership is that it's from the heart and that we give our leaders a chance to be successful at this by helping them to prepare. And the third kind of M&A leadership, I got into a thesaurus when I was playing with this, and galvanizing is what we came up with. And this is where a galvanizing M&A leader is just an amazing sponsor. And the role is to focus and decide and direct activity, the testing of things, and if it's not working, adapting and shifting, and being able to communicate what needs to be communicated in a way that as information changes, decisions can change. The trick to the galvanizing M&A leadership, of course, it's the role modeling in the influential, but is to be able to do this at pace. And what allows this decision-making and testing and adapting and communicating to happen at pace is that clarity and that deal context and the business context, so that the decisions and changes are made in line with the reason that you're doing this in the first place, which of course makes it easier for people in your organization to understand and frankly want to be a part of. A couple of other highlights around leadership from my research is that 28 of participants mentioned at least one leadership lesson, and that was mainly focused on the top team. Of significant leadership lessons are mentioned 27% more frequently in deals where the majority of people are likely to have had a negative deal experience when compared to those who've had a positive experience. And this is also just shows how it links together. It shows up, leadership shows up as the top thing that participants mention when we delve into what sits behind the themes significantly associated with employee experience, i.e. what went wrong, clarity, capability, execution, and also lessons learned about execution. So like culture, leadership is everywhere. Unlike culture, leadership can actually be used to predict whether or not people will have a positive experience, which will drive whether or not deal objectives are met. So I think I'm going to stop there for the moment. What I'd like us to do, I will actually take us through poll results. Let me share that, and then we'll go into some questions and answers. So our first question, for those of you who were on when we did this, was how important is leadership effectiveness to deal success? I'm just going to share my results with you now. So 100% of the respondents say that it could not be more important. Okay. Let's have a look at the second one. And this one is, how effective are your business leaders in achieving deal success? So looking pretty good. Bit more of a mix, but looking solid. And thirdly, we looked at how much does your organization invest to improve M&A leadership capability, from no investment to couldn't imagine investing anymore. So about 20% no investment at all, and a little bimodal action going on for the middle three options. I got my idea for this quick poll from Keith Dunbar, who actually asks this of his audience just casually before every session that he presents and everything that he does. So I thought I would ask you guys as well. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the day. So Prakya, what do you have for us by way of questions?
Yes, we have a couple of questions that I will raise right now. One of the audience members wants to know, does people experience also vary according to industry, geography, and size? Is there any pattern that you noticed?
Yeah, great question. Great question. And the short answer is no. So we had, in all of that qualitative analysis that we did, first up, the only significant relationship was, the only predictive relationship was people experience to deal outcome. And in terms of people experience, the only thing that matched was which side of the deal you were on. So we can predict people experience, oh, sorry, we can't even predict. There's just an association between deal experience and people experience when, and it's more positive when you're on the side that's in control, when you're on the buying side. So because that's just a feature of how something is set up, you'd say you want to be investing more in supporting the people in, if you know, for people not on the buying side, if you're going to decide where you're going to put more resources, that would be what that one tells me. But it's actually not predictive. In terms of geography and other, none of that, organization type, size, geography, none of those things even showed a significance, never mind something predictive. I was stunned, but that's what we found.
All right. So we have another question. Strong leadership, in my opinion, can have a positive impacts on deal culture. Do you agree?
Absolutely. leadership drives culture, and culture drives leadership, drives culture, drives leadership. And the reason it's so important is because what leaders do is so much more important than what they say. So when leaders are great role models, and if they're doing the things you need them to be doing in order for your business to be successful, and people emulate them, you're in great shape. The second you have leaders doing things that work against and work counter to what you're trying to achieve, you really don't have a chance of catching up. It's just how we humans work.
Yep, absolutely. And the same person wants to know, so by the opposite, poor leadership will inflame cultural challenges in the deal. I mean, that's also something that's quite apparent, right?
Yes, absolutely. So poor leadership will, and again, that's because if you're not doing the right thing, you're role modeling the wrong kind of behaviors. It actually creates a lot of cynicism, and it really destroys the trust that you have to have in order to take people with you on the journey. Yeah.
All right. So we have a couple of other questions. One is, do the three attributes of M&A leaders you mentioned, deliberate, influential, and galvanizing, overlap at any time?
Oh, that's a good one too. I get that question asked of me quite often. Look, they do overlap. So for example, sometimes, let me step back. So generally you're not going to see and don't need to see all of the attributes of all three in every leader. So where deliberate M&A leadership is critical is particularly in the beginning, where you know you're going to do a deal and you need to get your organization ready, and you need to be making the investments, and you need to be doing things on purpose. One of the craziest conversations that I have with my clients all the time is, oh, look, we'll start doing that, but we're not really sure. We're definitely going to do it, but we're not 100% sure when we're going to start working on the deal. So we don't want to start, in case we don't do the deal, or in case it's a long time before we do it. And the thing that always strikes me about this, and it's where the conversation goes, is these skills that you need in a merger situation, or a business sales situation, or a joint venture situation even, are just an amplification of the skills that you need to make a great organization. So investing to make your deals better in the future is also going to make your current work go much more smoothly. So the deliberate bit is generally in the top of the house. The galvanizing also has to match up with the influential. So you've got your very top people leading. They have to be a great role model. They might not be doing so much of the motivation one-on-one, but they're actually motivating at scale, and they must role model, and they must continue to develop. And with the influential M&A leaders, I think I mentioned before the importance of having those kinds of influences from the heart. I mean, that's what this is. It's actually from the heart. It's people showing up and being with their teams, not just doing jobs.
Okay. Another question is, if you had to pick one attribute that an M&A leader absolutely needs above all others, what would that be?
Oh, wow. If I had to pick one of the three, I would go with the influential. Because again, that role modeling is critical. And people trust who they're closest to. And so in the middle of your organization, people are going to trust their main leader more so than they trust the top of the house. And really, these things are won and lost on trust and people, knowing what's expected and having the ability to buy in, join into the vision of the future, and be able to take it forward. And without leaders that have that kind of influence and that capacity to role model, you're nowhere. You can say anything you want from the top, or prepare as much as you want to in terms of being deliberate, but if you don't have it from the heart, it's going to be a lot harder to make it work.
Absolutely. So we're going to take one last question in the interest of time. What is the perception of the leadership team and CXOs? Is it different from the general population that you've surveyed? Is there any different based on levels?
Oh, such a great question. A couple of things. When we look at when people report their experience, like the people who were, completing the surveys, that was one area where the more senior the person was, the more positive they represented their own experience. Now, we didn't actually put that through the data because it was just a function of them responding to the survey. But I think it's a really good watchword, because when we don't have if someone, I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. Can you say that question again? Let me just reform that.
What is the perception of the leadership team and CXOs? Is it different from the general population surveyed? Is there a difference based on level?
Yeah, okay, so people at a higher level generally have a more positive experience. And that goes to, one, being in the loop sooner. It also goes to having more access to information and possibly having the ability to influence a bit more. So yeah, the more senior would have a more positive experience. One of the things that came out of both the anecdotes, of most of the anecdotes, are some references to how critical teams were. And even in the worst kind of situations, people actually reported positive experiences because of the bonds that they made with people and the things that they learned. There's just any number of stories about groups that still get together on a regular basis to just celebrate what they achieved, or commiserate with what happened. And so yeah, absolutely critical, the team aspect of it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I think that's all other questions that we have now. So if any of the audience members has any other questions, you can get in touch with Karen post the webinar. We will be sharing the recording as well as the presentation, parts of her groundbreaking research with all of you. So we can go to the next slide, Karen. Yes, thank you. So I'm going to take this moment to just spare a couple of minutes to give you a bit of an overview about what Mergerware does. A solution like Mergerware is built for unprecedented times like we're facing today, to help companies collaborate and stay productive while achieving your organizational goals. What we see today or otherwise is that going digital in the M&A space has helped a lot of our customers really come up to time and not beat productivity in spite of the odds. So Mergerware is an end-to-end deal management software focused on helping companies optimize their M&A strategy, deal execution, and post-deal integration optimally without letting them affect their performances. So we can go to the next slide now. Yes, so just an overview of some of the key benefits of our solution. It is the robust security with role-based access controls and audit capabilities. It has pre-deal benefits focused on playbook management, virtual data room, buyer-seller communication, risk and issue tracking, analytics, as well as reporting. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. And of course, also the post-deal benefits focused on project management, process indicators, team communications as well as combined with aggressive top management reporting, which is focused on dashboard, executive reports, and financial synergy tracking. So if any of the members of the audience want to hear more about what Mergerware can do and how we can help your teams effectively come out of improving your productivity levels, even in times such as these, please do get in touch with us. Over to you, Karen, for the final conclusion.
Thanks, Pragya. So as I promised you guys, I just want to finish up with some thinking about where to start. And it sounds a little bit cheeky, but you need to start wherever you are. More important that you start early. So start wherever you are. And if you don't know where you stand, then find out. I've put a link to a diagnostic on my website. It's free for you to use. If you put your email address at the end of the diagnostic, I can send you your results. And that it's actually built around this idea of clarity, capability, execution aspects in your organization, and then specifically focusing on the leadership capabilities that are needed. So it gives a bit of a heat map or a view of where you're going great and where you need to make some investments. So if you don't know where you stand, find out. If you need something more robust than that, just get in touch with me. The details will come through with what gets sent after this webinar, and we can just talk about what it is that you think you need and how we might be able to get you a snapshot. If for whatever reason that you're not actually able to work out where you stand in relation to these things that we actually know impact on people experience and therefore impact on deal objectives, start with clarity, right? This is our strongest predictor. It predicts both deal outcomes and people experience, and it has a significant association with both. So, and this is all around your normal business as usual communications with your people, or information for your people about what's our business purpose, why are we doing what we're doing, and sharing the deal rationale and expected outcomes when you communicate about the deal in such a way that it makes perfect sense. It's not a shock to the system that you're actually buying someone or being acquired by someone. People say, oh yeah, that makes sense because what we're doing in our business is this, and of course it makes sense that we need to join a larger organization, or we need to acquire another organization to to get scale, or to bring in the kind of skills that we need to take our business forward. So start with clarity, absolutely. Secondly, focus on leadership. As we've said, leadership predicts people experience and has significant associations with both deal outcome and people experience. And I can't stress enough, I've said it in the middle of this presentation, but I'll say it again, you got to give your leaders a fighting chance, right? They can't do and be how you need them to be, and learn how to do that in the 10 minutes between when a deal is announced and when they're supposed to be showing up in the way that you need them to. And so it blends beautifully with any work that you're already doing on leadership development. If you're an acquisitive organization, think about what kind of support that you can build into your regular system and which groups would need which things. So focus on clarity and leadership as a start. Thirdly, I would focus on culture. Culture is everywhere, even though it's not predictive. And the place to start when you're getting ready for a deal on culture is actually with your own organization's culture, right? Does how people do what they do, is our culture suitable for where we're headed in the future? Is it the kind of culture that will support us to achieve our business objectives? And if it is, keep making it better. And if it isn't, then do the work to get it to a point where it is actually supporting. If you're already doing that in your organization, again, think about deliberate acts here. If you're already doing that in your organization, you are in a much better position than to be able to assess whether or not an organization or that you're looking at joining with your own, will actually help you get closer to your goals by virtue of their culture being closer to the culture that's needed to help you meet your goals. And then also, PS, looking at the cultural fit between your organizations to make sure that there are no deal breakers and that you actually can work together. So culture is everywhere. You need to focus on it, and you need to focus on it starting with your own culture first to put you in a position to, in the hurly-burly of a deal, being able to manage culture effectively. And lastly, the capability and execution fundamentals, I would see these as table stakes. Like, if you don't have your capability sorted and your way of going about executing these things sorted before you go in, like, you really shouldn't be at the starting line until you've got that sorted. So I'm making the assumption that you have those. Whilst they're not predictors, they actually make life a lot easier for everyone who is trying to do what you need them to do. So again, certainly do the diagnostic via my website and get in touch if you need anything further. I'm, as Praki said, more than happy to make my full research report available to you guys. We'll send a link to that to you when we send the information about this webinar early next week. So with that, Prakia, I will hand back to you in order to sign us out.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen, for the wonderful, insightful session. I think the audience have had much to learn from your groundbreaking research, and the insights would really help them go a long way in understanding their current organization structure, how things can improve in getting better deal outcomes. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day, and most importantly, stay safe. Thank you.